All right. So um, so what specific role did you have in the negotiations for this budget?
Well, as majority leader, I was one of the 6 to 8 people in the room for the last few months negotiating the budget and working to get to a compromise that a majority of legislators would agree to and the governor would sign.
Okay. Um, can you give us a sense of what the discussions were like? What the back and forth negotiations were
Right.
like?
Okay. Well, I'm really proud of the role that I played in having this become a bipartisan budget. I think it's easy to have a bipartisan budget when there's a surplus and everybody can kind of divvy up the extra money. But I think it's very difficult to get to a surplus when to get to a bipartisan budget agreement when there's a deficit, especially the kind of deficit we had this year, when you have to agree on the types of cuts and the types of tough decisions that we had to make. So I think, in general, I'm proud of the fact that we were able to do that. The Republicans hadn't voted for a budget in 10 years, and this was arguably one of the most difficult budgets we faced. A lot of give and take, a lot of back and forth, some decisions that not all of us are pleased with, but that's in the spirit of compromise to do that. And, we just needed to move the state forward and have a budget.
All right. How do you personally feel about the budget plan that was passed?
Well, I voted for it. I helped negotiate it, so I support it. And, again, there are things in there that I don't like. There are things in there I don't agree with. I would have changed if it was my decision alone. I would have made some different decisions for sure. And again, in the spirit of compromise, in the spirit of trying to get a majority of 187 legislators to agree on something, and also one that the governor would support, it was necessary to make various compromises. But all in all, I think that it's a good budget and one that will move the state forward and pays its obligations, especially in our pensions. But it also continues investments in areas that are important to the state.
All right. From as far as you know, how do you think all the budget plan will affect the colleges of Connecticut?
There are certainly it's going to be a little tough for higher education, but as Democrats, we fought very, very hard to reverse the cuts that were in the Republican budget that the governor vetoed. It was very important for us to restore a good chunk of funding that had been cut in their budget, especially for places like Norfolk Community College or Housatonic Community College and UConn. I think one of the best areas that we can make investments in right now in the state of Connecticut is in higher education. We have lots of jobs that are opening up here, but people need to have a good education. We have one of the most talented and the most highly educated workforces in the nation. We need to make sure that we continue to push in that direction and we continue to support that. While I'm not pleased with any cuts to higher education, knowing our fiscal challenges, I think everybody understood there will be cuts. But there's also on the table right now from the Board of Higher Education, Board of Regents, to kind of reorganize some things, and that will save money as well. We want to make sure that whatever we do, we minimize any impact to students and their ability to obtain a high quality degree from the state of Connecticut.
All right. As Senate Majority Leader, what do you have any plans to obtain more educational cost sharing funding for Norwalk?
Well, that was a huge victory for me in the budget this year, was finally having an educational funding reform in place for the first time in 20 years. And that was something that I had been fighting for over a year now. Ever since the CJF versus REL decision came down, I used that as a platform to have education funding reform, and said many times publicly and privately that I would not support a budget that did not have education funding reform. So I think that that is, for us, for the long term, for the state of Connecticut, having a formula that actually helps our cities, helps students who are English language learners, helps students who are on free and reduced lunch, helps students who are in poverty, will go a long ways to make sure we have the most highly educated and best workforce in the nation long term. Actually having a formula that we can count on, I think, is extremely important, because that had not been the case for a very, very long time.
All right. You heard it straight from State Senator Bob Duff. I'm Andrew Shukovsky.